Hello and welcome back to my channel and welcome back to Real Crime. That's R-E-E-L. So it's a show where I take a popular horror movie and retell you the story as if it was true crime. That way you can feel like you're enjoying true crime content without any of the potential ethical or moral dilemmas that come along with it. Today's case takes us to Chamberlain, Maine. Why do these things always seem to happen on the East Coast? I don't know. But Chamberlain, Maine, a quiet little town where the scariest thing wasn't the monster underneath the bed, but you could say it was the woman kneeling beside it. Because when it comes to Carrie White, I mean, I know media literacy is at like an all-time low these days, but I've seen a lot of people refer to Carrie as the villain in her story, and I have to aggressively disagree. There are two villains in the story, and their names are Margaret White and Chris Hargensen. Okay, those are the bad guys. Carrie, she's just there. So Margaret White is the kind of woman that makes you wonder, was she born this way or baptized into madness? So in order to understand Carrie's story, we have to start with her mom. So way before the Prom Night Massacre, before the pig's blood, before all of the iconic things we know about Carrie's story, there was a woman named Margaret Brigham, and she was born in the 30s. Not much is known about how Margaret grew up. There are different tellings and different versions of her stories, but what we do know is that her father was killed in like a bar fight when she was in her late 20s, and so she started going to like a fundamentalist church to kind of cope with the grief, and she got like a little too into it. She went a little too far. Okay, basically she became like a full-blown religious zealot, okay? Just putting that out there. And eventually she met a man named Ralph White, who is a construction worker, and he had a lot of the same views that she did. So naturally, they fall in love and they get married. The two of them believed that all forms of intercourse were sinful, but Margaret even believed that intercourse post-marriage was sinful, and Ralph didn't really quite take it that far. Generally speaking, in the novelization of their story, we don't get a lot about Margaret and Ralph's marriage, but we do get glimpses into it, and let's just say it didn't really particularly seem like a good one. He was a known drinker, he maybe even cheated on her a little bit, and one night in particular, he comes back from the bar, and she says he gave her that look, and he smelt of whiskey. Essentially, he seduced Margaret, and as a result of that night, she became pregnant. Months after the conception, but before the baby was born, some men were killed in a tragic construction accident, including Ralph. However, there are other versions of the story that simply say he ran off with another woman. So regardless of how he ended up leaving the picture, he was out of the picture before Carrie was even born. Margaret tells herself that Ralph's departure, was God's will, but really she feels abandoned, right? And after that, every year, every bill, every lonely night, it hardens her. She kind of turns her fury and her loneliness into doctrine, and she becomes even more intense about her religion than she was even when she was with Ralph. So when Carrie is finally born in September of 1963, Margaret does almost immediately try to kill the baby. Let's just straight up call it what it is. She takes out a knife, the same knife that she uses a couple of other times throughout the story, and she tries to kill the baby. She has like a Judge Claude Frollo moment where she looks at the baby and she has a moment of guilt, and she can't bring herself to do it. But from the first moment she knew she was pregnant, she saw Carrie as a child of sin, right? The devil trying to claw its way out of her because of her belief that even marital sex was sinful. So even though she ultimately lets Carrie live, she never kind of stops punishing her for being alive. So Carrie grows up locked away, starved of social interaction, sunlight, any kind of softness or parental love. She has a closet in their house, her prayer closet, and that's kind of where Margaret locks her in there to pray for hours and hours on end whenever she's done something that Margaret perceives as sinful, right? But to Margaret, the violence and the isolation that she puts Carrie through, it's not abuse, right? To her, it's purification. Every locked door, every, time she essentially beats Carrie, that's her way of cleansing her. And essentially what's happening is Margaret White is raising a ticking time bomb, but she's not listening for the ticking, right? And that's kind of just the thing, right? The bomb, it's not really just metaphorical. In the novel, Stephen King suggests that Carrie's telekinesis starts from a very young age. And little things, like slamming a window and objects shifting and that sort of thing. Lights flickering during her tantrums. Margaret thinks of these actions, these abilities that Carrie has, as the devil's work. And because of what Carrie's taught throughout her childhood, if you really think about it, by the time we get to prom night, she's kind of been taught that destruction is the only way to cleanse, right? Basically what I'm saying is she was set up to fail. So while all this is going on at home, in school, Carrie's just trying to do everything she can to, not even just fit in, but just kind of fly under the radar. She doesn't really know anything. She doesn't really talk to anybody. She's kind of just quiet and there. High school, in a lot of ways, can be its own horror movie for some people, and for Carrie, it definitely was. Our cast of characters at Carrie's school, that's a lot of C's, consist of Sue Snell, who is a girl in Carrie's grade who seems to be one of the only people with a conscience in this whole story. Sue Snell's boyfriend, Tommy Ross, who seems to also have a conscience and be a kind of decent guy. Chris Hargensen, who is sort of the lead popular girl. She might be the devil incarnate, to be honest with you. Her boyfriend, Billy Nolan. And then there is also the gym teacher, Miss Collins. So one day after gym class, the girls are in the showering up after gym class, as you do, like I said. And Carrie's washing her legs, and she looks down and she realizes she's bleeding. As a result of her mother's religious teachings, Carrie has no idea what a period is, right? Which I think is, you know what, I'll keep my mouth shut. But she doesn't know what a period is, and if you look down and you're bleeding and you don't know what it is, you're probably going to freak out. So Carrie thinks she's dying, so she starts literally screaming in the shower. And the other girls run to see what's going on. Carrie's, literally sitting in the corner in the fetal position, crying, screaming, bleeding, and they all decide to start throwing things at her, like pads and tampons. They throw it at her, and they're yelling, "Plug it up, plug it up." I don't know, maybe I was raised right, I don't find that funny, but okay. Eventually, Miss Collins hears that there's a commotion in the locker room. She runs in, she yells at the mean girls, and she goes to Carrie's aid immediately. I think she kind of explains to her, what a period is. And then Carrie has a meeting with the principal and Miss Collins. The principal keeps calling her Cassie because he's a jerk, and she basically gets to go home for the rest of the day. The girls that were bullying Carrie, obviously there's going to be repercussions for their actions. So they get a week of detention, of gym detention with Miss Collins. And if they skip any of these days of detention, the result is they get a 3-day suspension and refusal of their prom tickets. So most of them decide to do a week detention. Now there are two main girls here, Sue and Chris. Sue still feels like the detention isn't enough. She feels bad. She really feels like she needs to pay reparations to Carrie in some other way. So her boyfriend, Tommy Ross, is the hot guy in school, and I think he's about to be, he's on the path to become, a professional baseball player. So even though her prom ticket is not going to be refused, Sue decides to forego the prom and asks Tommy to take Carrie to prom so that she can have, the best night of her life and just feel accepted, and tells him to, show her a really nice time and all that sort of thing. And Tommy, at first, is no, I don't want to do that. I want to go to prom with you. You're my girlfriend. But eventually he agrees, and there's nothing nefarious going on here at all, okay? Now, Chris, she attends the detention at first, and then throws, a hissy fit, and walks out, and she has to suffer the consequences, right? So, 3-day suspension, and refusal of her prom ticket. I don't know how people's brains work, and how she could logic that this is all somehow Carrie's fault, but she decides it's Carrie's fault, right? And she decides she is gonna pay back Carrie. This is Carrie's fault, and she has to pay for what she's done. So, essentially, her plan is, now she knows, just from whisperings around town, right, that Tommy is going to prom with Carrie. So she knows Carrie is going to be going to prom. So her plan is she gets her little friends to be the ones who collect the ballots at prom. And she gets Tommy and Carrie to win prom king and queen. So that'll have to go up on stage. Now Chris and her boyfriend, what's his name? Billy. I wrote Tommy, and that's why I was confused. Chris and her boyfriend, Billy, break into a local pig farm. And Billy bludgeons a pig to death and kills it. And they collect its blood in a bucket. And Chris's whole plan is she's going to rig the stage up with a bucket of pig's blood above the stage. When Carrie gets up there to accept prom queen, it's going to fall on her, thus creating the biggest mean prank in horror history, the blood drop, right? So cut back to Carrie before Tommy asks her to prom. She's at home. Her mom is making her repent for the sin that is starting your period. And then eventually Tommy comes to the house. Carrie tries to, like, oh my god, like, you can't come in, blah, 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 like, shh. He asks her to prom. She eventually says yes, and she's very excited about it. She finally confronts her mom. Carrie really just wants to be a normal person who can interact with other people and do things, and that's all she wants, and her mom doesn't want her to do that. Carrie's trying to explain to her that not everyone is bad, not everything is sinful, and Margaret disagrees. Margaret tries to leave the house, and Carrie, with her telekinesis, slams the door shut. Margaret calls her a witch, and so Carrie tells her that, she's always been able to do this. If she concentrates hard enough, she can move things. She says she's not the only one who can do that. She's been doing research, and there are other people with this ability. She firmly tells Margaret things are going to change around here. So now we cut to prom night, right? Carrie is getting ready for prom. She's made her own dress. It's pink. Her mom says it's red. It's the devil's color. She's like, shut up. It's pink. Her mom starts doing all the theatrics. Margaret's like, don't go to prom, it's sinful. She's scratching herself, she's pulling her own hair. Carrie uses her telekinesis to throw her on the bed to shut her up, because she's like, listen, Tommy's a good guy, he would never hurt me. True. I remember the first time I learned about Carrie's story, I kept waiting for Tommy to do something evil. Never happens. But Margaret is telling her, like, don't go, they're all gonna laugh at you. Don't do it. Carrie throws her back on the bed. Tommy shows up. Carrie's like, you're gonna stay here until I get back. And she leaves. As soon as Carrie is out of the room, Margaret sits up in the bed and says, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. And then we go to prom. And Carrie is so happy. She's dancing with Tommy. She's talking to Mrs. Collins. She's being very shy. She looks gorgeous. She's having fun. This is truly a magical night. For this one shining moment, Carrie is genuinely happy. Sue even sneaks into the prom to, like, take a peek to see what's going on. And she notices a rope on the stage. She follows the rope with her eyes. At this point, Tommy and Carrie have been announced as prom king and queen because the ballots were switched, right? So they're walking up there. Sue's following the rope with her eyes. She sees it underneath. She sneaks over there. She lifts the little curtain and she sees Chris and Billy under there holding the rope. And she's put it all together, what's going to happen once Carrie gets up there. Sue tries to stop it, but Miss Collins doesn't know what's going on, and she pulls Sue out of there, pushes her out of the gym, closes the door behind her, essentially kicking out the one person who could have stopped this, right? So Carrie and Tommy are up there. Carrie's looking out at the audience. She's feeling the best she's ever felt. And then Chris pulls the rope. Pig's blood everywhere. The bucket falls, hits Tommy in the head, knocking him out, maybe even killing him, I'm not sure. But Carrie would have seen Tommy as, like, her only ally in that moment, and now he was gone as well. Carrie sees people in the audience start laughing almost as soon as Tommy falls. Whether they're actually laughing at her and she's imagining it, not sure. Her mother's voice saying that they're all going to laugh at her is also ringing in her head. The principal calling her Cassie instead of Carrie. Basically every slight to dehumanize her that's ever happened is playing in her head, and something snaps. When that bucket drops, you could almost say that Carrie goes somewhere else entirely, right? She has like a full-blown PTSD flashback to everything bad that's ever happened to her, every humiliation she's ever swallowed, and every warning Margaret ever carved into her about sin, shame, and punishment. The world doesn't just tilt for Carrie in that moment, it fractures. And the perceived laughing, it turns into mockery, and then into threat. And Carrie reacts the way she's been conditioned to, right? With overwhelming force. What follows can only be described as telekinetic carnage. She starts with shutting all the doors. She looks around the room, all the doors, all the exits, shut, locked, can't get out. The sprinkler systems and the hose for, like, if there's a fire, they start acting up. Now there's water everywhere. Miss Collins comes up to the stage to check on Tommy, and they try to carry Tommy out, but obviously Carrie's got all the doors closed, they can't get out. And then with water everywhere and Carrie's abilities, anyone touching anything electrical gets electrocuted, and then fires start. Before you know it, the whole gym is up in flames. There's chaos everywhere, everyone's running around, and Carrie just walks straight down through the middle of the gym, calm, with a sort of vacant look on her face, out the doors, closes them behind her, and everyone else is still trapped inside the burning gym. Billy and Chris are trying to make a getaway, but as they're driving away, they see Carrie, completely covered in blood, walking down the street. Chris is the one behind the wheel, and she tries to swerve to hit Carrie. She's not trying to get around Carrie, trying to hit her. But Carrie knows they're coming, right? And with her powers, she's able to flip the car multiple times, and it goes up in flames. Justice, if you ask me. You didn't ask me, but justice. When Carrie finally gets home, she's greeted with a house full of lit candles, and she slowly makes her way upstairs to the bathtub to wash away all the blood that isn't hers, and then she puts on her nightgown, and she's greeted outside the bathroom door by her mom. Margaret holds her and comforts her, surprisingly, but then she immediately turns into one of her twisted sermons about saving Carrie's soul. She literally starts it with, I should have killed myself when he put it in me. And I was just like, whoa. Basically, she believes that her daughter came home that night so that she could finish what she started when Carrie was a baby. She pulls out that same knife from somewhere, I don't know where she was hiding it, and in one swift movement, she stabs Carrie in the back. Carrie then falls down the stairs, and her mom follows her, and you know, her survival instincts kind of kick in. You've just been stabbed in the back by your mom. Your emotions are going to be all over the place, not to mention what just happened at the gym. So I wouldn't be surprised if Carrie wasn't exactly in charge of her emotions in this moment. And basically, they end up in the kitchen, and anything sharp that was on the counter ends up flying in the air and pinning Margaret White to the doorframe in a position very similar to that of a Jesus statue that was in Carrie's prayer closet. Once she's pinned in place, a couple of more sharp objects end up in her chest in various spots, and Margaret is dead. Once Carrie kind of realizes that she's just killed her mom, now she's really overwhelmed with emotion because while her relationship with her mother was obviously complicated, she still loved her. She's still her mom. And she's heartbroken about what's happened, so she tries to, like, unstick her mom from the doorframe, and while her emotions are flaring, the house is, like, rattling, right? She's freaking out, and the house is essentially now going to be crashing down around her. She takes her mom, she brings her into the prayer closet with her, and the house completely crumples around both of them, killing them both. In the aftermath, the only survivor of this whole thing is Snell. And her mom is planning to take her away. Like, let's just get away from here. Everyone Sue knew is gone. Like, let's just leave. She is plagued by dreams of what happened that night and her guilt about Carrie, basically. She feels like she did the right thing and it still didn't work, right? She tried to do right by Carrie and things still ended up this way. In her dreams, she visits the now vacant lot where Carrie's house used to be. She lays flowers down where the sign is, where the house used to be, and then Carrie's arm comes up and grabs her and tries to pull her down, so she wakes up from these dreams screaming. One can't help but wonder which factor in this story is worse, right? Is it Margaret, the way she sheltered Carrie, right? Her religious upbringing and being so strict that she didn't know what a period was, and that she couldn't, like, talk to people and that sort of thing? Or is it Chris with the pig's blood? Is that worse? Obviously, they're both terrible, but I can't help but wonder if the pig's blood didn't happen, there would have eventually been something to set Carrie off, to just have everything she's been pushing down her whole life come bubbling up, right? So what's the moral of the story here? Don't be a religious zealot. And if you're going to, don't have kids and pass it off to them. I don't know. I don't know what the moral of the story is, y'all. Carrie is a particularly unique story to me. I actually didn't know until I was looking stuff up for this video that Carrie was Stephen King's first, like, book, first novel. That's so fun, because it was definitely the first one that wasn't a short story that I read by him, so I didn't know that was, his first one. It was my first introduction as well into, like, a good for her kind of story, because who doesn't love watching all the people at Carrie's school who just, like, let her be treated terribly or treated her terribly get their just desserts, right? Like, who doesn't love it? Even Miss Collins, who does her best to be nice to Carrie and treat her well and punish the kids who aren't. Like, did she do enough? Carrie's already a senior by the time we see her story. Like, give me a break. And anyway, that's it for this week's Real Crime video. Thank you so much for watching this one. Make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe if you have not subscribed already. And I will see you back here next month for our holiday Real Crime, where we talk about a sorority in December that experienced some awfulness. See you then. Bye! I just want to say really quickly at the end of this video that I kind of had a hard time with this one because it's real crime, so I'm supposed to be talking about just the movie. But I remember a little bit from the book. I don't remember a ton from the book, because I read it when I was quite young. But I rewatched the movie, and I feel like there are so many things in the book that's different. Like, in the book, Ralph dies. In the movie, he left with another woman, so that's why I included both things, right? In the book, the gym teacher's name is Miss Desjardins, I think, and in the movie, it's Miss Collins. So I went with Miss Collins because of the movie, but... And then I also used the Stephen King Wiki for a lot of my background info to, like, line up some of the book stuff. And if you're wondering about any of the details in the story, it's either from the movie or from the book. And from the book, I mean, I got it from the Stephen King Wiki because I couldn't remember the exact details. But one of the reasons I want to do this one now is because Mike Flanagan, who, if you know, is my favorite horror creator in the world, right? Director, producer, all these things. He just posted on Instagram a couple weeks ago that they've wrapped on his Carrie series. And I just feel like if anybody was going to do a Carrie series, I'm so glad it's him. Mike Flanagan's work is always, there's always moments of actual scariness, like of horror, but he's really good at the tugging on the heartstrings aspect of things as well. Like, I always end up scared and bawling my eyes out in Mike Flanagan work, and I feel like Carrie is the perfect story for him. Like, I'm going to be bawling. I'm going to feel bad for everyone. If he gives Margaret a particularly tragic backstory, which I think is really easy, we're going to feel bad for her too, especially because I've never heard her name said out loud before. Samantha Sloyan? Sloyan. She's playing Margaret, and she, Margaret is not far off from her character in Midnight Mass. She's gonna be so good. I don't think I've ever been this hyped for a series like this far in advance before as I am for Mike Flanagan's Carrie, because I just know there's no way he doesn't do a good job, right? It's gonna be so good. So the contents of this video might not be the same as Mike Flanagan's show, but just know that when that show comes out, I'll be set. I'll be here, I'll be watching, I'll be paying for whatever streaming service it's on, because I will subscribe to anything to watch it. I will be here, and I'm so excited to see it. But yeah, I just want to give you a little more context at the end of this one for how I came to be with this one. Goodbye for real this time.